There was no respectable first half. There's no talks of a moral victory. This was a beatdown from start to finish. And boy, we were expecting a blowout loss, but the game was ugly. The offense is disgraceful, and it's going to be a long year in Westwood. We'll talk about UCLA's blowout loss here tonight against Oregon on tonight's edition of the Locked On UCLA Postcast right now.
You are Locked On Bruins Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Los Angeles on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Floors up, Bruin Nation. What's going on? And welcome back to the latest edition of the Locked On UCLA Postcast, coming at you live, as always, on the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel and after the fact, wherever you get the Locked On UCLA podcast feed. If you don't know who I am, my name is Gavin Carlson, a former credentialed UCLA journalist. I was a UCLA student, covered the team with the Daily Bruin. I was born and raised a UCLA fan, obviously a student. I just graduated 3 months ago, actually, so a recent alum, lifelong fan, formerly covered this team. I'm used to being in the Rose Bowl, in the press boxes, used to being in the press conferences after the game, interviewing the likes of DeShaun Foster, and during my time, mainly Chip Kelly. But now I'm just a fan like all of you, and a sad fan tonight. A frustrated fan because UCLA is terrible. There's no other way to put it. You know, last week we had a half where we got to, cheer. A pretty respectable first half in Baton Rouge, the first ever game in Louisiana against an LSU team that everyone expected to blow us out. And I gave DeShaun Foster a lot of credit last week for that first half. They talked about how before the game all week, he was playing highlights from boxing upsets. He was telling this team that they were going to shock the world. And for a half last week, it looked like his players believed him. They had a very respectable first half against LSU. Of course, they fell apart in the second half. We expected it. LSU is a much more talented team. They're a better coach team. And it was going to be the case tonight. But this game, there was not even a second where UCLA looked like DeShaun Foster motivated them. There wasn't a second where it looked like half of UCLA's roster was the caliber of Oregon's. Literally half of UCLA's team used to be on Oregon. And yet you wouldn't think it. Oregon, more talented, so superior in terms of just execution, coaching, everything. And this is the crazy part. I thought Oregon did not look good for most of this game. They didn't look like, we know that it's been kind of a shaky year for Oregon so far. This was a preseason top 4 team, maybe a favorite to push Ohio State in the Big Ten, and they've fallen down the rankings just about every week, despite not losing, because they haven't been impressive. And tonight was another one of those nights, in my opinion, where they didn't even look that good. And yet, UCLA was never in this game. They were never in this game. And so I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm supposed to intro this show before I jump into this one. So I will quickly say, shout out to the sponsor of today's show. It is FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before I get started, shout out to everybody in here because it is late. It is after 11:40. I started a little bit late. I'll be honest. I was watching this game with some friends, some current UCLA students. I made the drive back. Took longer than expected. So apologies for being about 5-10 minutes late. I didn't expect many people to be awake because that game put us to sleep. Obviously, it started at 8 p.m., one of the latest starts I've ever seen for a college football game. And maybe that was our only chance, honestly, was maybe there being some Big Ten after dark madness. But there wasn't. This was just a classic blowout, but at the same time, just a terrible football game. I don't know about you, but not only because I'm a UCLA fan. If you're just a random, I hope nobody on the East Coast stayed up to watch this game because this was just an ugly game. Dylan Gabriel carves up UCLA's defense, and yet I think he played like one good quarter. Right? He finishes 31 of 41, 278 yards and 3 touchdowns, but I think he only looked good in like the first quarter and a half. Oregon was sleepwalking in the second half. And they still outscored UCLA. UCLA did not score a touchdown with their offense. Literally, Dylan Gabriel throws a pick six. It's a 14-point swing, right? Should have been a touchdown for Oregon. Instead, it's a pick six, 100-yard pick six for Brian Addison against his former team for UCLA. And despite the 14-point swing, UCLA's down 28-10 at half. Just think about that for a second. Do you know how bad you have to come out to have a 14-point swing and still be down 18 points? This was a game where the students were back in Westwood. Obviously, the stadium's not in Westwood. I thought a decent amount of students made the trip to Pasadena, more than I expected. I was at the Rose Bowl 2 weeks ago for that massacre against Indiana, and it was pretty empty, but the students weren't in session yet. I get it. I'm a former student. I get it. There were students in that section today. A lot of Rooter buses coming from Westwood, driving fans over to Pasadena, and it was a late game, obviously, 8 p.m. kickoff. So the only way that those fans were going to stay for a whole game is if this game was close, and it never was. I was really curious to see how UCLA would come out early in this game. Did I expect UCLA to get blown out? Absolutely. I tweeted it. I said, Oregon's favored by almost 4 touchdowns. I think we're going to lose by 4 touchdowns. I think Oregon is just way better in every single phase. Offensive line, defensive line, skill position, secondary, quarterback, coaching. I expected a blowout. Most people did. But I was curious. How would UCLA come out? The one thing I gave DeShaun Foster a lot of credit for, like I said, was how he came out last week. And so if we were able to come out in the first quarter, in the first half, and keep it close, I would say, you know what? DeShaun Foster's not probably ready to be an elite head coach, right? But at the very least, I'd say, okay, we're starting to see a trend here where in games where we're expected to get blown out in, there is something about DeShaun Foster, the motivation factor. Because he's a former player, because he's beloved by his players, because he's one of the best to do it in the UCLA jersey. Maybe, despite not being ready in terms of X's and O's, in terms of execution, in terms of in-game decisions, we'll get to that again. More dumb coaching decisions by DeShaun Foster tonight. But if we came out in the first half and looked anything like we looked last week in the first half, I'd say this team's got a long way to go. But at least we know we're going to come out with energy. That was a decently packed Rose Bowl tonight, despite it being a late start. And there was no life. No life. Ethan Garbers, the box score just says 12 of 20, 118 yards, 2 picks. That's pretty darn bad, just reading it. But if you watch the game, the offense looked even uglier than that stat line would suggest. Just no life. Garbers has a second to throw before he gets hit. And the few times where he has 3 seconds to throw, he still stands in there long enough to make sure he gets hit. He gets hit every single play. I'm not surprised that he leaves this game early. We'll see what the update is in terms of his injury. Justin Martin came in and looked like a guy who's barely played quarterback at this level because that's what it is with him, unfortunately. Just think about how different these two programs are. Our guy, Dante Moore, our second highest, depending on who you ask, highest recruit ever, is like their backup third-string quarterback. He was supposed to be the guy to turn this program around. And he's the third stringer at Oregon. Well, Ethan Garbers looks the way he did tonight. Was the second pick his fault? I don't know. It was a 4th down. He had to throw one into a tight window because he was getting hit. But the first one, under pressure, bad throw, everyone's to blame. Otherwise, he didn't look good, though. He had like 1 or 2 good throws. He had a lot of late throws. There was one play. It was 3rd and 3 or something. It was before the 4th down pick, actually. 3rd and 3 at midfield. There's 2 guys running a route, which Bieniemy, hello? Foolish play call. You come out in the shotgun on 3rd and 3. People are expecting pass. It is a pass. You run 2 routes. There was like 6 Oregon DBs and 2 UCLA receivers running routes. So it's already a disaster. But Garbers rolls to his right. Both receivers are going to the right. Everyone can tell right away that there's only 2 guys running a route. And Sturdivant's not very open, running in the flat. But Garbers waits and then throws it at the last second. By then, of course, he's not open. It's just like he loves to hold on to the ball. And I get it. When you're always under pressure, the few times you have time to throw, you're so used to having to dodge D linemen and everything that it's almost like you're more comfortable dodging D linemen. You're more used to having to escape to buy time. So when you have 3 seconds, you're waiting for the D-line to get to you before you buy time anyways. It's weird. You can tell that the clock in his head is all messed up. The moral of the story is there's never guys open. The few completions there were like back shoulder throws to Rico Flores. Obviously, TJ Harden had a decent game on the ground, but every single person involved in the UCLA offense deserves blame. TJ Harden has his best game of the year, and it's 53 yards. He got like a third of those, more than a third of those on one carry, 21-yard run. Other than that, is there anybody that you can say was amazing? Quasi Gilmore is somehow wide receiver 1 at UCLA. How many times do I have to say this? J.Michael Sturdivant is an NFL talent receiver, and he never catches footballs. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. This guy at Cal was lighting a lot of teams up, including ours. He lit UCLA up 2 years ago. Last year, he was okay. I thought he could have been better. This year, he doesn't have a catch today. I don't think he had a catch last week. What's up with that? Why in the world is Logan Loya in the doghouse? J.Michael Sturdivant's in the doghouse. Rico Flores, a talented guy, 3 for 27. Quasi Gilmore, 4 for 31. Monteval had a costly drop. He had one catch for 21 yards. That was probably Garbers' best throw of the game on an out route. But other than that, he had a drop and otherwise wasn't impressive. Nobody played well for UCLA on the offense. Nobody. TJ Harden's the player of the game, 13 for 53. Justin Martin comes in, throws 4 passes, and gains 7 yards. And then the biggest culprit of them all, as always, is its offensive line. It's terrible. It is terrible. And like 2 plays in, those guys going down. There's bad juju, bad vibes. It's all bad with this offense. You've got a former running back legend, and there's no running game. You've got Bieniemy, who's pass happy and has led Mahomes to things, although clearly that was Andy Reid. And there's no pass game being generated either. There's nobody open. And so UCLA falls behind 28-3 at one point in the first half. And Oregon is 2 yards away from making it 35-3 before they throw a pick six. It should have been 35-3 at halftime. At home. There's no excuse. What do you think is going to happen next week at Penn State? We scored 13 points. 7 of them were by our defense. We didn't score a touchdown today, and I think our offense is going to be worse next week. We might score 3 points next week. And we all expected this part of the schedule to be tough. And we expected DeShaun Foster to have to grow as the head coach. But this team is way further behind. This program is way further behind than any of us expected, I think. Is UCLA going to be favored in a game the rest of the year? I don't know. Michigan was put to the test by Minnesota today. You think UCLA is going to be favored by 3 points against Minnesota? I don't know. Rutgers is better than UCLA. Iowa certainly is. The only team you could maybe be favored against is Fresno State. They just got killed today by UNLV. But even then, you'll be favored by 3 points. And if you do win by 3 points, it'll be 3-0. Because this offense has proven they're not going to score 21 points. This offense is terrible. I didn't think Oregon's offense looked that great. I thought our defense looked actually decent at times. Obviously, you had the pick six. Oregon looked really sloppy. They dropped a touchdown in the first half. Gabriel also missed a couple wide open guys. He had a deep ball where the guy was wide open and he underthrew him. They still made the catch because he was that wide open. But I didn't think Dalen Gabriel looked all that great. That pick six was terrible. And you throw a pick six at inside the 5. A 14-point swing and you're up 18. It's unbelievable. It's just, wow. We expected bad, but this was bad. This was worse than even I expected. So we're going to take our first break here. When we come back, we'll get into the nitty-gritties in terms of what happened drive by drive in that first half. The second half, there's not much to talk about. We'll get to some of the costly decisions I thought DeShaun Foster made, including you're down 21 with less than 8 minutes left in the game and you're punting. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. We'll talk about it all after our first break here on the Locked On UCLA Postcast. I'll be right back. Now, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Football fans, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. One more time. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here live in the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel, a very late Locked On UCLA Postcast. It's officially after midnight thanks to this 8 p.m. kickoff. If you don't know who I am, I'm Gavin Carlson. I already gave my intro, but former credentialed journalist for UCLA, former UCLA student, lifelong UCLA fan, and I'm pissed off. You can probably tell, because this team is awful, way worse than anyone could have expected coming into the season. And they showed it tonight, losing 34-13 to the 8th-ranked Oregon Ducks, who they're a good football team. They're a really talented football team, but they did not play their best game tonight, and they still crushed us. We already talked a little bit about the offense and how abysmal it was, but this game started right away with Oregon's offense showing that it was going to have a great day today. And it didn't even play up to its full potential. But the first drive, they just moseyed down the field, 12 plays, 75 yards, 5.5-minute drive. There weren't any big plays on this drive. 6-yard run, 5-yard pass, 8-yard pass, 4-yard pass, 4-yard pass, 8-yard pass. Just a bunch of short dink and dunks. Gabriel does hit Ferguson for 18, and then there's an 11-yard run for Jordan James before eventually on 3rd and 3 at the 12. At this point, the crowd, the students that are there, first time there's a game during the school, during school starting, after school started, if I could speak. This was the loudest they got all game, was on 3rd and 3 at the 12 on the first drive, and Dylan Gabriel hits Trayshawn Holden for a 12-yard touchdown on what was like a 4-yard pass. I mean, he threw it like a little crossing route for like 4 or 5 yards. Trayshawn Holden takes it all the way in. And UCLA, you could tell all game long, they didn't want to get beat deep. They wanted to, play this soft zone coverage, afraid of the talent, the speed for Oregon, hope that forcing Dylan Gabriel to dink and dunk would eventually lead to some mistakes. And in that first drive, it didn't. He picked us apart. He did look good in the first drive. Short throws, quick. He's got that quick trigger. It's so ironic watching him, too. This guy was supposed to be a UCLA quarterback, which makes it really funny. He was supposed to be a UCLA quarterback. DTR decides he's staying, so Dylan Gabriel goes to Oklahoma instead. I think right now we wish he'd had Dylan Gabriel instead of Ethan Garbers, obviously. But right away, you got a sense of, okay, kind of like the Hawaii start, we're giving up way too much space. This time it makes more sense. Oregon is more talented than us on the outside. But dink and dunk, short passes, and eventually it's 7-0 just like that. Now then UCLA responds with probably their best drive of the game. They go 12 plays, 66 yards, and eventually kick a 27-yard field goal. This team is not good enough offensively to convert in the red zone. I mean, if you remember last week, they scored a touchdown because Ethan Garbers broke 4 tackles and then drills Logan Loya in the end zone for a contested catch while he's getting hit while he's throwing. It was a Superman play by Ethan Garbers. That's what this offense has to do in order to score a touchdown in the red zone. And unsurprisingly, when Garbers didn't have a superhero play today, they weren't able to convert. It was still a pretty good drive. There were a couple penalties, but you could tell UCLA was a little bit more committed to the run early in this one. It felt like, okay, we're going to try to slow this game down, commit to the run, even if it's not working, help this offensive line, and maybe keep this one close with the run game, chewing the clock and all that. It was a 7-minute drive. TJ Harden had a couple runs, not for much, a 3-yard run, a 1-yard run. There was an 8-yard pass from Garbers to Gilmer, a 5-yard pass from Garbers to Peterson, and then a pass interference by Oregon was a huge penalty, gave us 15 free yards. But from there, not much. A Gilmer pass for 12 was pretty nice from Garbers. And then, like I said, Garbers' best throw of the game, in my opinion. This nice deep out route from Maliki Matavao kind of a flood concept. The outside receiver goes deep, takes the deep coverage with him. The sideline opens up, and Garbers, nice anticipation. When he has time, he has a pocket, and he has a clear read, and the read's open. I know these are a lot of ifs and whens, but when those things happen, Garbers can be a good quarterback. But most quarterbacks at this level can hit a wide open tight end on a 20-yard out route if you have time to throw. So I don't think you get much credit for that. But nonetheless, Garbers does hit Mataval there, gets UCLA to the Oregon 36, or excuse me, to the Oregon 15, and then on 3rd and 8, after a sack and a 3-yard run, that's when there was nothing open. Garbers checks down to TJ Harden for 4, and UCLA settles for a field goal inside the Oregon 10. At that point, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking, okay, it's 7-3. We're in this game. UCLA actually holds Oregon to a field goal on their next drive, despite a couple big plays, a 19-yard pass to Sadiq, an 11-yard pass to Tez Johnson, and then a Dillon Gabriel run for 13. But after that, 3 straight decent defensive stops. UCLA forces a 41-yard field goal, and it's 10-3, and UCLA's got the ball, and just like that, UCLA can maybe go down, score a touchdown, tie this game at 10, and you're okay. But what happens? First play of the drive. Ugly. We'll leave it at that. Illegal formation. Really frustrating. It just like instantly, you have a decent play. Garbers hits Sturdivant for 8. You're thinking, okay, something's going to start in this drive. Decent completion. Illegal formation because Unije, I think that's how you say it, the left tackle, is lined up too far behind the center. That just can't happen. It just can't happen at this level when your offense is this bad. An 8-yard completion happens like 5 times at most in a game for UCLA. And one of the 5 times it happens, you're not lined up correctly. So then it's 1st and 15 at the 20, and Garbers throws a pick. And at this point, I looked at my friend and I said, I think it might already be over. And surely enough, from there on, it was over. Oregon scores a touchdown on the next drive. They're starting at UCLA's 23, so of course it's not going to be very difficult. There was a pass interference on Jalen Davies at some point, and then Jordan James punches it in for a 2-yard run. How does UCLA respond? At home, packed house, decently packed for Rose Bowl standards. You're down 17-3. There's a lot of people saying this game's already over. How does UCLA's offense respond? A first down run for -5 yards. How? And then a Garber sack for -5. Before the drive even starts, it's over. 5-yard loss on a run, and then a sack. So it's 3rd and 20, down 17-3. The game's over. Garbers completes a short pass, UCLA punts. It's 17-3, Oregon's got the ball, and then Oregon absolutely embarrasses us here. 52-yard touchdown to Tez Johnson, and this is just awful by UCLA's defensive secondary. Dillon Gabriel takes a snap, fakes a QB power, kind of. He takes like 3 steps to the left. And despite 3, not 10 steps, he takes like 3 steps to the left. And UCLA's entire front 7 commits, blitzes Dillon Gabriel. And the Tez Johnson just sneaks behind. It's like 3 receivers against 2 UCLA defenders in the secondary. Or 3 maybe. And Tez Johnson's wide open for a 52-yard touchdown. Just like that. It's 23-3. And then just to add insult to injury, Oregon decides to go for 2. Classic Oregon. It reminds me of when Chip Kelly was at Oregon and they would love to run up the score and do stuff like that. It's 23-3 and they're running like fake field goal setup things. Dillon Gabriel throws it, Sadiq throws it to Terrence Ferguson for the 2-point conversion. It's 25-3. And one more time before we take our last break here. 17-3, UCLA responds with a 3-and-out, back-to-back 5-yard losses. How do they respond to now 25-3? How does the offense respond? Keegan Jones for 8. Okay. 2nd and 2. Garber sacked, loss of 7, 3rd and 9, 3-yard pass, punt. Back-to-back 3-and-outs, down 17-3 and then 25-3. The game's over. The game is over. Oregon scores a field goal. It's 28-3. Then take one guess. If you didn't watch this game, take one guess what UCLA's offense does as a response. Guess. If you guess 3-and-out, geez, I don't know how you could have guessed, but you'd be right. TJ Harden run for 2, Garber's incomplete pass, and then a loss of 7, 4th and 15, you punt. 3 straight 3-and-outs, down 14, 22, and 25. The game is over. Now, fortunately for UCLA, Dillon Gabriel has one of the worst picks I've ever seen. Just throws the ball right to Brian Addison when it should have been 35-3 at half, and instead it's 28-10, and Oregon acts like this game is still close. UCLA ends up cutting it to 28-13 because Oregon was sleepwalking in the second half. But then UCLA's offense didn't do anything from there, including, like I said earlier, deciding to punt the ball down 21 with 7 minutes left. And not at the UCLA 20. You're at the UCLA 41. I know you don't want to go for it in your own territory. You're down 34-13 with 7 minutes left. Go for it. What are we talking about? DeShaun Foster had a call last week where it was 28-10. And we were out like the LSU 15 or something, and we kicked a field goal with like in the fourth quarter. In the Indiana game or the Hawaii game, I don't remember. I think it was the Hawaii game. It was like 4th and 3, and we chose like a 50-plus yard field goal instead. I know he's a rookie head coach, but the in-game decision-making has been brutal. The play calling has been brutal. The execution has been brutal. The only thing we had last week was coming out with some energy. Today, we came out looking brutal. Everything is a disaster with this team. The defense was the best part, and they gave up 34 points. Just think about that. They were the best part of this team today, and they gave up 34 points, and it should have been 41 because Dillon Gabriel threw a pick in the end zone. Just absolutely awful. We'll take our last break here. When we come back, we'll highlight a couple players on the defense I thought were okay, look at a couple more key moments, and we'll wrap this one up here on this edition of the Locked On UCLA Postcast. I'll be right back. Now, finally, today's show is brought to you by Gametime. If you don't know what Gametime is, it's an authorized ticket marketplace and has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And true story, like 1010% true story, I'm going to a concert tomorrow, and I bought my tickets using Gametime. And this concert's tomorrow, so you're kind of in a rush to get the tickets, right? And you go on to Ticketmaster, and there's like 1,000 tickets listed, and none of them are ever good on Ticketmaster, by the way. You go on StubHub, maybe not 1,000, but there's like 200, and most of them are bad values. There's like 1 or 2 where they give it a grade of like 8 or plus. You go on Gametime, and there's like 12 tickets. And it's not because there's only 12 tickets listed on Gametime. But like I just said, it filters out the fluff. It doesn't show you 100 tickets that are listed on Gametime. It only shows you like 12 to 20 and lets you pick from those because it knows you don't want the same seat that's twice as much as the ticket next to it. It's common sense. So Gametime, it's the place to be to get tickets. And true story, I use it all the time. I used it 3 times in a week span in New York. New York Liberty game, New York Yankees game, bought the ticket on the way to the game, on the subway. It's the best app to buy anything. I mean it. So use the all-in pricing feature where it shows you the total upfront price, no surprise fees at checkout. You must toggle this feature to use it, but once you do, it's great. There's the seat views from your seat before you buy the ticket. There's the lowest price guarantee. Well, we'll credit you, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. There's Gametime ticket coverage and so much more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Back here live one more time on the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel. This is the Locked On UCLA Postcast. It is over 10 minutes after midnight here in Los Angeles. It's past 3 a.m. on the East Coast, and thank goodness that over half the country was not awake to watch this football game because from a UCLA point of view, it was embarrassing. Honestly, from an Oregon point of view, they didn't look that impressive despite winning by 21 points. And just from the neutral point of view, if you were not rooting for either of these teams, you did not get an entertaining football game. This was an awful football game. Neither team looked good. The most exciting play of the game was the pick six when the game was already out of reach. So brutal game to watch, even more brutal if you're a UCLA fan. I already talked a little bit about it, but going forward, it's going to be really, really bad. UCLA has Penn State coming up in Penn State. It won't be a whiteout. We all know they're not wasting a whiteout on UCLA, but Penn State, they got a win today. Decently impressive against Illinois, who is a good football team, top 20 football team, and Penn State limited that offense to, I think, 7 points. So once again, I think UCLA is going to score like 3 points next week. Then we host Minnesota. If we don't win that game, we might not win a game the rest of the year until Fresno State. And I mean that. That's not even a crazy comment. Because after that, we go to Rutgers, who is probably a better football team than UCLA as is. Not to mention, we got to fly literally about as far across the country as possible from LA to Jersey. Who knows what the weather will be in October. We're going to get killed. Then we go to Nebraska, who maybe is an elite football team, but they're a good football team. I promise I'm not crying. This is sweat. It's hot where I am right now, but I might as well be crying with how sad the state of affairs are. When we host Iowa, which will be an abysmal game to watch, I think 2 of the worst offenses in the country. Then we're at Washington, who is not very good at all, but still we're on the road. We host USC. That rivalry never makes any sense. Frick, Ethan Garbers blew out Caleb Williams last week. That tells you everything you need to know there about this rivalry and how it cannot make sense. But based on what USC has shown, they look pretty good today, beating Wisconsin pretty handily. That's probably a loss. And then we host Fresno State in a game that you better win, or you might have one win all year. So yeah, it's looking bad. Real quick, I guess I'll highlight a few players I thought played decently well. Brian Addison did have a good game. Going against his former team, he did get hurt, did not come back in. We hope it's not serious because he's been one of our best players in the secondary. But in addition to the pick six, the only good play for UCLA maybe all game, Addison did have 8 total tackles, second most on the team, 7 solo. Carson Schwezinger continues to be a tackling machine. He had 12 last week. He has 13 today. I honestly don't even know if he's that good of a player, honestly, because you see him get his ankles broken a lot. But he still always seems to lead the team in tackling, so he's got to get some credit there. Kalen Moore had a physical game. He had 2 TFLs. He was also in a bunch of, skirmishes after the play. Whatever. KJ Walls had a TFL as well. But other than that, just not impressed with Devin Kirkwood and Jalen Davies continuously. They're getting burned. They're getting beasted and feasted on the sideline. These were supposed to be 2 veteran corners that have been doing it for a while at this point. You're expecting better stuff from them, and we haven't seen it. So I guess those were a few guys. On offense, really only TJ Harden. And even then, still less than or just over 4 yards a carry. This team rushed 24 times for 47 yards. If you take away the Garber sacks, it is still not good at all. It's still, if I can do the math, 19 for 65. Less than 4 yards a carry for this offense. Just no good. Just no good at all. So, yeah, there's not many positives. I guess the only positive is that Brian Addison had a pick 6. Mateen Bagani made a kick from over 50 yards. And that the Rose Bowl was surprisingly decently crowded in the student section for like a half. That's what we get to celebrate when you're a UCLA fan in 2024. But enough of the negativity. It's well after midnight. I'm surprised that there's over a dozen, almost 2 dozen people in here. A shout out to all of you guys. Y'all are the real MVPs. I appreciate you being here watching this late. Now go get some sleep. I'm going to go get some sleep. Let's have a good NFL Sunday. Like Craig says here in the chat, get ready for the Rams at 10 a.m. Yes, because I will be doing the Locked On Rams podcast whenever that game ends, around 1:30. I might also do the Locked On Angels postcast because their last game is tomorrow, and I don't want to miss the last game. I want to celebrate, doing the Locked On Angels postcast for most of this season. So I'll try to do 2. It is difficult to do 2 postcasts at once, especially when both games are overlapping. We'll see. But at the very least, I will be doing the Locked On Rams postcast tomorrow, and I'll be doing the Locked On UCLA postcast the rest of the year as well. So don't worry. No matter how bad this team looks, I will be here to talk about it after every single game. So with all that being said, I'm going to go get a towel and wipe off my sweaty face. Clearly, my face wants to act like I'm crying. I'm not physically crying, but emotionally I am. It's sad. It's sad. Yeah, I don't even know what else to say. But all right, take care, everybody. Appreciate you watching me as always. Leave a like, comment, all that good stuff. Check out my personal UCLA YouTube channel as well. Just look up GAV UCLA for that. Yeah, plenty of content coming out on all of these platforms. But yeah, leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you all tomorrow for the Rams show, maybe the Angels show. I'll certainly catch you next week after UCLA probably scores 3 points against Penn State. All right, take care, everybody. 4 is up, 8 clap, all that good stuff. At least we're a good school. Academics. Yay. All right, take care. Have a good one. Go Bruins.